Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Supply Chain Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery. And before we kick off today's show, I'm going to address the bandage in the room. So, if you're wondering what's Tom doing with this big bruise on his nose, on this big bandage there, it's not that I got into a bar fight last night and I'd be saying you should see the other guy. No, it's not. I had a minor surgery on my nose last Monday. We're recording on Thursday, so last Monday, 3 days ago now, I had this minor surgery on my nose to remove a cyst. And if I were to say you should see the other guy was a surgeon, so he's fine. So with that out of the way, my special guest on the show today is Rob. Rob, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, Tom, thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon, good day, everyone. I'm Rob Haddock. I'm formerly with the Coca-Cola Company here in the U.S. I'm in my fifth day of post-Coca-Cola retirement, so I'm starting to ease into the next chapter of my life. I've been with the Coke Company for over 40 years. Most recent roles were in transportation strategy, and looking forward to having some dialogue with you today, Tom.
Fantastic. And talk to us a little bit about the transportation strategy, Rob, for a large company like Coke. Is it Coke or Coca-Cola? Which is the correct? Because you use both there.
It's Coca-Cola is the appropriate, the Coca-Cola Company with a hyphen,
Right.
is the company, but Coke for short. Yeah. Anyways, transportation strategy, it's far-reaching, and when you think about our Coca-Cola network, we are a mix of bottling companies around the globe. We have a very large North America domestic, Canada and U.S. presence with non-carbonated soft drinks brands such as Minute Maid, Simply Orange Juice, Powerade, etc. So we have just lots of distribution between production and distribution sites. You see a lot of red trucks around the world. Those are mostly targeted at last mile. But I was really focused on the middle miles. I was getting production from wherever we were making it in the North America network to bottling outlets, to food service distributors, to grocery retailers. So a little bit different route to market model than I think Europe and other parts of the world has, but one of the larger supply chains that the Coke system has here in the North America landscape.
Okay. And for that kind of transportation fleet, what kind of challenges were you hit with typically?
Well, if you think about it, you're partnering with 3PLs because the size of the volume that the company deals with, the red trucks can get it to last mile and they can do some limited moves between production and distribution centers. But overall, you are dealing with third-party logistics companies, either asset-based or brokerage-based companies who manage those miles for you. So it's all about the relationships that you have with those team members and trying to find the best service, the best price, and just keep constant flow going because there is a lot of activity that each one of these teams manage. And economic conditions, weather conditions, production breakdowns, anything can get in the way of delivering that product to the end customer. And well, when that happens, they're not very happy about it. So you have to do your best to make a very resilient supply chain that's able to absorb both what we know and potentially what we don't know.
And what kind of strategies or even tactics do you deploy to try and make that more resilient, that supply chain?
Yeah, I think when I look back over time, when we didn't even know what the word resiliency meant, because it just kind of came out during the COVID pandemic. But looking back over time, it was a series of: do we have the right people, tied to the roles? Do we have the right technologies that are providing us maybe leading indicators versus lagging indicators? And the processes, if something is going wrong, is there somebody assigned to go a little bit deeper in it and take a look and see, okay, this is what I think is going wrong, and this is the recommendation as to what we should probably do going forward. I would tell you that my resiliency journey probably started back in 2018 when I was put into the role to try and do something different with transportation versus the traditional methodologies. And didn't really look back and say, okay, we've done a lot of things until just recently to say, okay, all of these things that we did over time gradually seem to make it more robust. And now, as we are looking at what's the next downturn that ground transportation, air transportation, ocean might be facing, is that have the supply chains done enough? Have they thought about what is potentially going to be the next item that gets in the way? And I think about just my first day after retirement. I'm thinking, do we have a resiliency readiness score? Do we have a
Right.
way to measure it? If you were to say, okay, here's the scenario, how would you approach it? So I think there's a lot of opportunities that every company could look at, now while things are still a little bit on the calm side, to say,
Hmm.
all right, well, let's throw a couple of scenarios out there, and how would we behave, and what would be the results?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a fascinating idea, and one I've not heard mentioned before, a kind of a metric for resilience. I don't know what that metric would be, but if there was some kind of standard metric, 3 crises averted per kilometer or something.
And well,
um,
well, I think one of the things that made me think about it is, I mean, we have, North America deals with hurricanes.
yeah.
And we start tracking them, and we predict their path, and there's not much you can do about it once it's set on a destination. But you do start to assess, okay, what's my readiness prior to the storm, and what's my recovery post the storm?
Hmm.
So if you take that same mindset and you go, all right, we're going to have a driver shortage in 6 months. What do I need to do today to behave in a way, or the economy is going to rebound, or something is going to be a significant issue? Have you done what you needed to get ready for that?
Okay. And do you think that it would be possible to have a kind of cross industry metric for resilience scores that, you could compare one organization against another?
Well, I think there's, if you tie it back to like what's your supply chain's maturity, and you just make it easy, you rank a few attributes 1 to 5. Are you a one, and you're going, oh my gosh, I couldn't, I couldn't survive the next rainstorm. Um,
Cross my fingers and hope everything's
right.
okay.
Yeah. 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 Nothing comes apart. Or you're feeling pretty good about what you've done, and you're in that 3 to 4 range, and you're going, okay, I could probably absorb this. And each one of the geographies around the globe probably have their own, local and global issues that
Hmm.
they're dealing with. But just reflect back and go, am I ready for what we don't know is going to happen next?
Okay, interesting. Yeah, yeah, I can see that. We talked in the prep for this about the Shipper of Choice initiative. For people who might be unaware, can you talk a little bit about what that is and why that is?
Yeah, what we've seen, I think, also around 2018-19, the idea of a shipper of choice started to come out as which shippers are doing the best possible job of keeping drivers moving. So when you come to a pickup or a receiving dock, are you are you there for hours? Are you there for minutes? And when you're greeted through either the security checkpoints or the shipping office, are people happy to see you just like you were checking into a nice hotel, or are they throwing the paperwork at you? And are you being treated with respect? So we thought that, in combination with making sure the drivers are being taken care of, also thinking about what's my relationship with the management teams of these carriers. When you start to think about the shipper of choice, it's what is my relationship behavior, both at the strategic level with the ownerships, and with at the tactical level with the drivers. And am I being treated like I would expect to be treated in any one of these environments? So the shipper of choice has started to grow in terms of its relevance here in the US. I was at an event 2 weeks ago where they identified 25 top companies who are shippers, considered shippers of choices, through nominations from drivers, carriers, maybe even some self nominations. But to be on that list, it's saying that at least these companies are aware of the value that transportation has in the industry, in the economy, and efficiency is paramount when you're keeping the drivers moving. They're called drivers for a reason. They're not sitters. So if you keep them moving, you release capacity back to the industry because you basically, it's like manufacturing 101. If the line's not running, you're not making product. So
Sure.
just think about the trucks as that product that you're moving from A to B.
Right.
So it's the Coke Network was recognized as their shipper of choice. Very pleased, proud of that accomplishment. But I want to continue to get the mindset out across to others, in the North American landscape to say, here's potentially the way that you should behave that would put you in that shipper of choice category. And the carriers that we partner with, they do appreciate us, the way that we go to market, the way that we try and keep the drivers moving. It's recognized.
Okay. Is this initiative widely known across the US, or is it something that's still very much in its infancy?
I think it's 5 years in now, Tom, and I think it's starting to get relevance because there was a big reveal at this industry event a couple of weeks ago, and it's by an organization that is very big in promoting or reporting stuff in the world of transportation here in the States and in Canada. So I think it's getting a lot of eyeballs on it. The more people do see it, and then there could grow desire to become considered as a shipper of choice.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
And does it have knock-on implications for business as well?
Well, in an environment where there's ample supply, you don't have to be your best self, but in an environment where there's choices. So if a provider has choices between company A and company B, I would rather be the shipper of choice that helps them decide if I have one truck and I have two loads, who's going to get it?
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
In terms of increasing efficiencies for organizations and finding the right technologies to do that, because there's an alphabet soup of solutions out there to make organizations more efficient, and I have 330 episodes of this podcast recorded now.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them have been with organizations who claim to increase the efficiency of supply chains. How do you go about sourcing the solution to make your organization more efficient, or solutions?
Tom, I've been intrigued by a couple of questions. One is, how do people define logistics? So there's the continuum of logistics. I think most people understand what manufacturing is. You're converting stuff into a finished good. It's pretty defined by a starting point and an end point. When you start to talk about logistics, logistics could be inbound logistics, outbound logistics. It's the warehouse management, it's the yard management. I tend to have a couple of technologies that help me in the production space for everything from the planning of logistics to the execution of logistics. I've been to many of these event exhibit halls where there could be 100, 200 different exhibitors, all with the technology that is designed to help me. I'm going, all right, where in my logistics flow does it fit into? Is it replacement? Is it complementary? If I do think it's going to add value, how do I get the rate of return, under control so I can sell it up through the organization to get the funding and the buy-in to go ahead and do it? So I remember being in an event earlier this year, and there were a couple of folks from one of the other industries, and they were sitting on the sidelines looking out over the hall, and I just started a casual conversation with them, and they said, we're so far behind and we don't even know where to start. Uh, it got me thinking, as a shipper who's sought after from time to time during these events, I tend to try and stay, down the middle of the aisle because I don't want to get brought into a conversation with a provider who may have a technology that's wonderful, but it's nowhere near what I need. So I just thought, wouldn't it be a good idea if you are going to one of these events, you have a rough understanding of how well your tech stack is today and what is the complementary technologies that might be in that room that you go have that conversation with. Because right now I feel if I'm the vendors out there, I feel like I'm just throwing, I'm fishing. I'm throwing lines into the water and
Hmm.
hoping that I can snag somebody from the stream.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
No, I've been to these events as well, and you wander the halls and look at everything there, but finding one that actually solves an actual need is quite challenging. I got to think. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Well, and my wife's funny. Sometimes she'll come to these events with me and we'll go through the vendor halls. And of course, she's looking for all the little gizmos that people are offering. And I'm like, no, no, don't, don't get sucked in, or else I
don't
have to
let
have
them
a
reel you in.
conversation. Yeah, don't fall for the trap. But I just thought maybe there's a better way. And I want to continue to think about that because most tech, most logistics teams have, they have an ERP, they have a TMS, they may have a YMS. But that's just for a shipping company. Transportation companies too have the same problems. What are the things that I really need that would add value? And there are so many core technologies like your SAPs, or your ERP systems, or your TMS systems. But then there are all these auxiliary items that you can
Yeah,
bolt on. It's like accessorizing a vehicle per se. Am I going to get more out of that vehicle after I do all the accessories?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, fair point. Fair point. I was at a couple of events recently. I was at the ASCM event in Brussels a couple of weeks back, and a couple of weeks before that, the CSCMP event in Barcelona, where we met.
Hmm.
And at both events, talking to people during the coffee breaks and things, I ran into a couple of people at each event, and it just happened to come up in the course of the conversation that they were in a transition from one role to another. And so am I. I was laid off last year, and I'm looking for a new role at the moment. And it occurred to me, and I shared this with the organizers subsequently, that if the name badges that we all had on had an option that you could get a little sticker or something, you put it on the name badge and it says, I'm looking for a role, or
Hmm.
I'm hiring. Then as you're wandering around during in the exhibition hall or during the coffee breaks or at the receptions, you could quickly identify and match up people. And of course, if this was advertised ahead of time to people, it would make the event even more attractive to people who are trying to hire and for people who are trying to be hired. But to take that a little further, I mean, to your point, if you had one that said, I'm interested in talking to people about logistics, or I'm interested in talking to people about warehousing or whatever it is, then again, you could have that could make your search for solutions a little easier, I want to think.
Yeah. Well, the event I was at a few weeks ago, it wasn't a large vendor hall, but 25, 30 vendors there. And honestly, I recognized two or three. And I talked to the event organizers and I said, wouldn't it be great if you had a listing of all of the service companies that are here, and then, one to two lines, a short paragraph as to what are they offering?
Yeah. Hmm.
Because I learned a little bit from some of their presentations, and I thought, well, I don't need this, but I know somebody who does. So I helped put a connection there. The bigger the room, the more complex, the more unaware of what am I looking for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Now I've been to events with hundreds of booths and stands and things, and it just becomes crazy at that point. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
The electrification of transportation, Rob, is something you have had to have been watching with interest in the last few years as it started to take off. How do you see it progressing?
Well, I see a lot of, continued a lot of dialogue on, the larger vehicles, the Class 8 vehicles.
Hmm.
And when I think about, the degradation of payload density that it would have on these vehicles, plus you start to think about the long haul charging station requirements, the time to charge. It seems like I know that would be it would have a lot of presence in the industry saying, okay, yeah, we're now running a lot of our long haul vehicles on electrics. But I think the realities is that the smaller vehicles really should be where the focus is. And I think about, the last mile should be the focus versus the middle mile
Uh-huh.
until we get really good at this. because most of the last mile delivery fleets, and I don't think it's even delivery fleets. It could be buses. It could be anything that's running in a closed loop where it's coming back to a domicile where it can
Mm.
go through the recharging process. Those are the areas where you probably should start to focus on and just see what a dent that would have. How many vehicles does it take? And I think you even mentioned that some of those companies, whether it be taxi companies or last mile delivery companies, are starting to really invest in, expanding their fleets in the world of electrification.
Yeah.
I know a lot of companies are, here there's a lot of hype about, class 8 vehicles, but one or two of them on the road, but they can only go a couple hundred miles and you lose 10,000 pounds of payload. I don't think that's the place to start. It would be probably some of the most obvious where you could get a lot of marketing value from it, but in terms of relevant impact, I wouldn't go there. Plus the grid, some of the studies would tell you that the grid needs to be much larger, especially during the summer periods where air conditioners are being fired up here in the US and the grid gets put under quite a bit of stress.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, speaking to the head of the Electric Vehicle Association in Norway, forgotten her name, but she was telling me that, in Norway now they're at about 90% of new vehicle sales being electric and have been for some time.
Hmm.
It's a little over 90%. And they've seen that the increase in demand for electricity is around 7%. So
Okay.
it's not as big as people are concerned about. And the other thing about it is that most people who have an EV, and okay, I get that this is generally, we're talking residential here as opposed to commercial, but still a lot of this would apply to commercial as well. A lot of the vehicles are charged overnight when there isn't that pressure on the grid, and then it doesn't become so big an issue. But I think the point about the Class 8 vehicles is well made. The Class 8 vehicles are still very early to be electrified. I think they're going to be, and I think it will take time. The only real decent offering out there in that space for now, I think, is the Tesla Semi, just in terms of the range and the haulage that it has. But the others won't be far behind. And the road network of chargers still needs to be built out. That is an
Yep.
issue. The Tesla Semi can do 300 and 500 miles, depending on the battery option that you go for.
Hmm.
And of course, also depending on the load that's in it. If you have a load of potato chips in it, it'll go further. If you have a load
Sure.
of bottles of drink, it's going to have a shorter range. But the whole thing about the batteries is that they are improving every year on year, in terms of their energy density and consequently the range, and their prices dropping as well. So I would be I'd be quite confident that within 5 to 10 years, pretty much all new Class 8 trucks will be electric. People won't be buying diesel ones anymore. Other people talk about hydrogen, but I think that's a non-starter in terms
Hmm.
of both cost and complexity. Electricity is ubiquitous. Hydrogen isn't really. I mean, it's
Right.
ubiquitous in the universe, but not right here where we're looking to put it into trucks. So, any comments or
Well,
feedback on that?
yeah, I think when you if your payloads way out before they cube out, you're probably going to be some of the last candidates to adopt electric.
Right.
Kind
Yeah.
kind of use that as your rule of thumb because then you are reducing the number. Well, you're adding the number of trucks to move the same amount, so that's counterintuitive. Yeah, and it's not to say that like a class 7, a day cab that doesn't have the sleeper on it is
Mm.
not a bad idea for a larger vehicle that has a closed route that can
Yeah.
get out and back within the same day and then charge overnight. All for that technology. But if you're coast to coast shippers in a country as vast as the United States, you
Then it
don't
becomes
want
more
to
challenging.
be,
Yeah.
it becomes a lot more challenging. So let's work on things that are close to the nest before we start migrating, across states and continents end to end.
Yeah. I remember talking to Geotab a little while back, and they had developed a tool which could examine your fleet and look all across your fleet and see which routes were the best ones to electrify first. So it would say, okay, for this particular routing and for this particular one, you could do it tomorrow, but for this one and this one and this one, maybe not so much. Or, so there's a lot of things like that out there as well, I think, which are going to help people.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it someday, Tom, it'll be there. It just, it'll probably start with the more smaller, more nimble vehicles, and then gradually get it. I mean, where we're at today took some years.
Exactly.
So it's very difficult for it to move overnight.
Yeah. Rob, we're coming towards the end of the podcast now. Is there any question I have not asked that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to think about?
Well, I just, one of the things I do wonder about, and I'm going to probably put some more thought into it, is just the overall definition that logistics. What do you think about logistics, or what do people think about when the word logistics comes up? So I've been very curious as to how different organizations define logistics. The reason being is that I've worked forever in a sales and marketing type organization. Most C-suites might be, sales and marketing individuals or finance. And the word logistics is so broad. How do you define it to those folks who maybe it's not their forte? Especially when you're trying to come up with solutions to solve logistics gaps. And when decisions have to be made between, I'm going to invest in something over here on the sales and marketing side versus on the logistics side, and there's only so much to go around. How do you get your fair share? And I thought maybe the way you tie logistics into justification of approvals is you tie it back to what's it mean to the end customer. So is there a toolkit that logistics professionals could use that would help simplify their message back to the organization to say, I need this shiny new thing because it's going to do X.
Right.
So that's been some of my struggles over the years is, we all want to be better at what we're doing. There's lots of solutions out there, but it's finding that right solution and then finally getting the financial backing or the change management backing for it.
Yeah. How to justify it. Yeah. Gotcha.
Yeah. How to justify it at the end of the day.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. Rob, if people would like to know more about yourself or any of the things we talked about in the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
I would say, LinkedIn is always a great avenue to reach out. And then I do have an Outlook email address. It's rob.haddock@outlook.com. So if anybody wants to continue to have ongoing dialogue, Tom, I look forward to it. I have to mix, golfing and hiking and tennis with a little bit of staying connected to the industry.
It's a tough life, Rob.
It's
feel for you. Great. Rob, thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Have a good one.